We're going to look at the technique to create similar pop art that you're so familiar with, the Marilyn Monroe kind of silkscreen printing by Andy Warhol. And we're going to be using the image on the left to create the image on the right, and then be able to actually create multiple different effects and so on with it. So first things first, let's have a look at the image. So let's just launch this PSD file for now. We'll launch it straight into Photoshop, and as we can see here, there's lots of different layers, but at the heart of the technique, what we're going to be showing you is a mode as far as an image blend mode, which is multiply, and then we're going to be using hue and saturation to colorize. Okay, so usually if we went into Control U, so this would be a destructive adjustment to an image because we're not working on a kind of adjustment layer. And if we just simply move the hue and saturation, that's going to do what we need at the end of the actual procedure. So this will give us the kind of the main thing. However, when we're doing the main technique, initially we're going to be using and clicking onto the Colorize option here. And that is going to allow us to color black and white to a specific color that we want. Once we're at the kind of the colorizing stage, we could either use, as I said, the Control U to actually adjust it, but that is destructive. Or how I prefer to use things is using an adjustment layer here, so we can basically go in at any stage and change the whole look in exactly the same way, but we can kind of have a control and back step it in each kind of section. Okay, so we're going to be first of all having to make some selections. So let's go back into Bridge. We'll launch the image. And then from here, we're going to be making some different layers based on the different areas of the photograph. So if we think about the image mapping of the image to begin with, we want the background, we want the face, we want the lips, creating new eyebrows, and we want the hair in those kind of orders anyway. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is basically go into our selection tool, and in this case the object selection tool. And we're wanting to actually select the girl. Well, that's the wrong way to begin with. We really need to actually go in and select the different areas. Well, because I want the background, I can cheat and use the object selection, as I said, using the select subject command here. And that should do a very good job to actually select all around the girl. And it's pretty much done what we expected it to do. So because I don't want the girl, I want the background, what I'm going to achieve now is I want to invert that selection. So we just go into select and then basically inverse. Remember the shortcut Shift Control I, and then at this point we just go to Control J, and that is really what we're looking to kind of have. So I'm cheating to begin with. It's all about making things just a little bit quicker for ourselves, isn't it? Yes. And I want to control click onto this image. That's going to remake the selection of the image itself. And what I want to do, I should have said to begin with, I want to make sure that this is a black and white image, which obviously is. What I want to do now is paint onto the actual background. But before I do that, I want to kind of make sure that all these layers that we're going to be doing are using the multiply blend mode. Okay, so that's what we're looking to achieve. Then let's select our brush, make sure we've got some kind of grey on top, and now if I just get a biggish brush, what I want to do is paint in, and you can see it's quite a hard brush because we're painting pop art style. So again, as I said, like a screen print. Okay, so we've got our image here. Right, so technically we've got the first stage of our background. If we want to, we can just click on it and just type background so we know what we're working on all the time. I'm going to deselect, I'm going to Control D to deselect the crawling ants. And now this is the first stage of what I want to really be showing us. Again, we've got a lot more things to select, i.e. we want the hair, suppose let's just do a quick one of that. Oh, wrong button. I want to select the quick selection tool and just go through the hair. Don't worry if I'm picking up some other bits for a minute. Need to do that again. And we don't want the forehead, so we're going to press the Alt key and deselect these areas a minute anyway. And the great news is, because this is a screen print technique, let's say, we're adding kind of, it doesn't matter how rough around the edges these things are. Okay, so we've selected the hair, and in this case what we want to do is make a new layer. Yes, and now I can paint this layer in exactly the same way. So let's select the brush tool. We're going to go in and paint the actual, just the hair, what we want in here, and then we can Control D it to deselect it, and then all we need to do is remember to put this into the multiply mode. If you find that you need some more detail, we can change the actual mixing mode and everything else with it and things later, but let's stay on multiply for now. Then in exactly the same way, we would go in here and make another selection. In this case, it's going to be the magic wand. Let's just, oh, I lied. It's selection tools. It's kind of making the choice before you start, Mark Leghorn, and I just chose the wrong one. Okay, so there's our lips in exactly the same way. Let's create a new layer. Let's select the blend mode to multiply. Pick up the brush tool, and we start to actually paint in here again. So you can see there's some areas that we want a little bit more. So let's just go in and add into the selection itself. And we're just going to press the brush tool, shrink it down, left bracket, and then we're just going to go in and paint. So I would say that for the majority of you really looking for this as a technique to really expand your kind of photographic art, you're going to be probably using the likes of paint brushes to kind of create the selections, rather than doing what I'm doing as a photographer and trying to actually cheat the selection area, the area with it. It's a hard brush edge, so we can get a really strong kind of cutout. What happens with screen printing is that basically there's a kind of a glue mask that is stuck to the silk screen, and then basically the glue is what won't allow the printing ink to go through. So by doing that, it allows ink that is not protected by glue to actually pass through to the surface below. I probably don't want these teeth in, so I'm just going to go in and mask it. So click on the mask. Okay, exactly the same way though, we want X to have black on top. Let's just go in and make a selection along those lips. Because it's a mask, I can come back in a minute, but let's fill in the edges first. Okay, so there we've got our teeth back. Make a selection just along here, and this is the slowest part, I promise you, and it depends on how much you want it to be kind of more of a perfect kind of solution for you and things. Really, I'm just going in here and just selecting the lips again. Okay, right, so remember we have to have it in multiply mode, and we're working on this image here. Now I mentioned that we want to colorize this technique. Okay, so if we just look at the lips first, as I mentioned, there's two ways to do the same thing. One is going to be a destructive, one is going to be a kind of adjustable technique. So the destructive way is going into image adjustments and into the hue and saturation, and what we want to do is make sure we click on colorize. As soon as we colorize, what other color is basically here is going to add into that kind of look and feel no matter what. At this point I can increase saturation and then basically change it to whatever color that I want. Okay, so if I wanted the likes of the lips and I wanted some eyebrow kind of work or whatever it would be in the same way, then we could actually have that on the same layer. But this is a destructive one to begin with, so I'm just going to press Control Z for that, cancel it to get rid of it. All right, and then I want to work on the one that I can kind of control. So I'm going to work on the half moon on the layers palette and click on the hue and saturation adjustment layer. And before I do anything else, I want it to just work on this layer below. So I would press and hold the Alt key so it just is referenced to the one below. I'll show you what happens if you don't do that in a minute, okay? So in this way, what we want to do is click on Colorize. We want to go ahead and actually choose the strong red. Let's push the saturation up to begin with. So we've got a really kind of great look in here. Okay, so if we just kind of zoom out for a minute, we switch off that adjustment layer, and here you can see where it was. Right, so this is the one we now know we're going to adjust. If I want to do the same thing with the eyes, yes, so like some eyeshadow perhaps, yes, let's go in and basically paint in here. So we need to select on this mask again. We're now going to pick up the B for brush tool again, yes, and we're going to paint directly on it. First things first, let's make a bigger brush. Don't be afraid of bigger brushes to begin with, and just go in and make that bit of a technique. Obviously, if you wanted to spend a little bit of time with it, we could perhaps sorry, I'm just trying to do something while I talk, which is hard at times. Okay, so we've got something there, but let's kind of mask this out now. Yes, so again, making sure that black's on top, and then we'll just go in and mask out the shape that we don't want. Now, as I mentioned, the great thing about silkscreen is that the registration of the ink pretty much is just different each time. So the benefit of doing this in Photoshop is that the selection of where the ink is going to go is going to be the same place. Just do that. Okay, so let's just go in again and just X and remove some of this on the eyebrow, on that end there, and pretty much it. Okay, so we can add into the selection. So remember, I can go in here and basically change the hue and saturation to any of these straight away, and we've got the image done. Well, we've already made the selection of the background, so let's click onto that, and now let's do exactly the same thing. So we're going to click onto the half moon, and we're going to go into the hue and saturation. This time though, I'm not going to make this adjustment layer just affect the layer below. I'm going to make it affect the whole image. So we're going to see the green change here as well. All right, by clicking on Colorize. Remember, Colorize is the secret to this technique when we're working on black and white. And then straight away, as you can see, it's basically given the effect across the whole of the image. So if I just move that up towards the kind of the blues and the purple end, let's move up the saturation more, you can see the big difference that's gone on now. Now I just wanted to affect the background. So remember, pressing the Alt key and just hovering between the two layers, just clicking onto that, now it just actually affects the background layer itself. Right, let's do exactly the same thing with here. If you want to, you could Alt drag an adjustment layer down onto something else. That makes a copy layer, yes, but it won't associate it with that layer. So let's do it again. Hue and saturation. Associate it before we do anything else. This is just for the hair, so we're going to change it in a bit more of a wacky kind of color perhaps. And remember, we're just having it affect here. So this kind of hair is really not taking on much color. So let's look at likes of a different kind of blend mode to see if we can kind of make it kind of work. Okay, so before we do anything, what we need to make sure we're doing here is hitting that Colorize button. If you don't hit the Colorize, it's not going to give it color. Okay, so let's kind of create that pinky kind of hue. We've got that here. I think we need a little bit of more detailing on the hair, a little bit of correction with it, but we also need to perhaps lighten it up here. Yes, so we're there, but let's go in and adjust this mask. So first of all, we're just going to paint in again, so we need that brush tool. Let's get in a little bit closer. And we're going to make the size just that little bit bigger as well. So if we do too much, you can see what's going on now. Let's mask it again like we were doing. Just pushing up here. I think this area needs a little bit more finessing though. So let's go back in, making sure we're using a slightly smaller brush now. Just kind of drag it in and just give it a bit of a smoother edge, as if it is glue that's seeped. And if the mask is in the way for a minute, we can kind of remove that. So let's go back onto the mask and let's just paint out some of this again. Good. I'm going to work on here, so I just want to bring some of that mask back now. I want to paint onto the actual image. Okay, so straight away you can see what we've pretty much got for ourselves, and it's beginning to actually make a kind of a real selection. So what we're really doing is kind of making a choice of what areas we want to affect. So for instance, if I want to affect the whole face now, as far as a screen color is concerned, go back to my original image, go back to a selection, yes, and we'll just kind of bring it all the way through to the bottom. We'll just go in and add in that ear as well. So just remember the shift to actually bring it in. Anything else we want to do? Let's bring in some of this hair as well. Whoops. Control Z that. Let's just go and lasso it. And we'll just press the shift key. And we'll just bring in that part there as well. Okay, so now we get a new layer. So if I just do Control J, that will actually make a new layer, as you can see here, just of everything. Let's switch the others off for a minute, just so we can see what we're doing. Yep, so let's switch these off. So we're working just on this facial part. And now what we want to do is go in and add that hue and saturation. Colorize it. Let's not take the saturation too much. Let's brighten up just a little bit. So all this is doing is giving us just that little bit of hue. Okay, there we go. So we can put the other layer back on again, but you can see it's adjusted across the whole image. Remember, all we want it to do is affect the image here. Do I want it on the eyes? I don't, so I want to go in and mask again. B for the brush again, and just basically go in and actually paint over the eyes. And then we can go ahead and switch everything back on again, and pretty much we start to make up this kind of look and feel that's amazing. Once you're happy with the basic selections that you've done, one of the great things now is if we use the Shift Control Alt E command, which is make a layer based on all other layers visible, and then we just click on to that adjustable hue and saturation. we can go once more. We don't need to colorize now. We just need to actually change the actual pigment, as it were, so the hue and saturation twist in. And of course, if you want to go and affect another area before you get here, or go back to another stage, you can do that at any stage. Hope you enjoyed this quick technique on a look like Warhol.